Hey, folks, Zach Osterman here, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. Mike Niziolek was 45 minutes late. This is Mind Your Banners. Anyone who got the Outcast reference in the show title, bravo to you. Mike, I was thinking about this yesterday. I named a podcast earlier this year. I said, it's the big one. It's Illinois.
Whoops.
And like, how many games has Indiana? How many games?
That was only half in Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, how many games has Indiana played that were more important than that?
All of them.
Obviously, not least this one, Peach Bowl, college football playoff semifinal, 7:30, right? 7:30.
I actually have no idea.
7:30 Friday here in Atlanta. We were kind of in a sequestered in a corner. I hope that. Please let us know if the audio is working. We're using the microphones we used last time, and we had to unplug kind of impromptu. But we are sequestered in the corner of the media hospitality area yet again. And no, that's true. It looks a little bit less like we're being kept in vacation. I think the biggest, probably the most inescapable, at least specific to the game, conversation surrounding the build up to this game has been the fact that you don't get a ton of rematches in a college football season.
Sure.
You've written about that. Kurt Cignetti only had it happen one time in
twice.
His career, twice now. I think it was once.
It was his last year at IUP and then his first year at Elon.
Okay, that's right, because they played James Madison twice in that year, didn't they? It's already happened a couple of times in these playoffs. It will be the first time it obviously happens to either of these teams, and it is an inescapable layer to this game, I think, for both sides. In ways, it should be said both good and bad.
Yeah, the coaches were asked about sort of like the chess match within the game, and they were reluctant to sort of give anything away. But I think they talked about just, what you see on tape is not what you're going to see in the game, right? They're going to add new wrinkles based on, like, you think we're going to run this out of this. It's going to be different this time. And so I think that's why you heard, I think especially Aiden Fisher talked a lot about that, like, I'm throwing the tape out, we'll use it, we'll watch it, we'll get to learn their tendencies, but like we're ready to not use that as the end all be all. We have to watch kind of their body work after, the body work before, to sort of just determine, what this team is. And obviously, personnel wise, Oregon will be a little bit different. They've had some injuries and some things happen at receiver. Running back sort of up in the air. I guess they welcomed back a transfer that had been in the portal.
I think he's in the portal, and for a while they thought he was going to play, and then there was a suggestion he was not going to play anymore, and now he's going to play.
Yeah, so back and forth. But so personnel wise, they've got some uncertainty that Indiana doesn't have, and I guess I'd ask you that because I think that is one kind of key difference. If you're looking for differences between the team, Oregon's coordinators have had to shift their focus kind of back and forth between their new jobs. Will Stein, I think, went to Kentucky.
Will Stein to Kentucky, Tosh LaPoy to Cal. Yeah.
And so they've had that without, and obviously had to spend more time at those other jobs now because of the transfer portal before the last round. And then you've got all this kind of transfer madness because they're on a different, their academic calendar forces their players to go in earlier. I think they're on trimesters instead of semesters. And so that's caused some, they've had, I think, more than a dozen players into the portal. Not all of them are obviously key contributors, but I mean, Indiana had four that, really one was sort of on, maybe you consider the 2 deep. Do you think that impacts Oregon? I mean, and Kurt said, he mentioned, like, look, their staff continuity has mattered. And so, like, I just think that's a key difference. One thing that the Indiana hasn't had to deal with.
Yeah, I think I would take that in a couple directions. Number one is that everyone's distracted right now, but Indiana has been able to stay more streamlined than most staffs. Most rosters, to your point, really no one that you would have expected to be like a really meaningful contributor in this game has gone into the portal. Indiana hasn't had an injury pop up unexpectedly. Like we wonder about the edge rushers. That's fair, but Indiana's at least had time to plan for that. They've played a game without Stephen Daly, whereas Oregon is going to have to be kind of figuring out this running back situation on the fly.
Yeah.
I think they've also got some issues in their secondary, as you mentioned. And then, of course, the coordinators and the fact that they've been splitting their time with a program that's now flown across the country twice.
Yeah, because they're not splitting their time just trying to get transfers. They're getting transfers for a different program.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, too, and I talked to Brian Haynes a little bit about this Wednesday night, is we have been treating this idea of a rematch as though it's a negative for both of these teams. That, are you worried that they'll have spotted something on your film? Will you sort of will you be second guessing yourself? Should I should I, is it a bluff? Is it a double bluff? Is it a triple bluff? Like, is it?
If it's a triple bluff, is that just not a bluff?
Right? Yeah, but something that I talked to him about, and he acknowledged, was the flip side is you don't, you said what Aiden Fisher said about the film, but that is valuable too. You don't, especially in this day and age of the portal and roster turnover and staff turnover, you don't get a clean look at an opponent like this very often. And when you talk about staff continuity, I would back this staff to take that film and say, this is a once every 5 years opportunity to play a team, get 60 minutes of film of our players against their players, our scheme against their scheme, and then actually refine it, make it better, go back and we would have done this, or we would have done this, we would have changed this about the way we approached this look or this fit or whatever. Yes, I think that it's in a way, I wonder, when you bring up all of the sort of additional stress and strain that Oregon has had to endure in the build up to this game, I wonder if elements of this being a rematch actually start to work in Indiana's favor.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly possible. And, I think we've talked about it sort of maybe off camera, and just in terms of like which team probably needs to make more changes to the game plan than and I think that was Oregon, because I think they kind of got away from, a lot of that was due to what, people mentioning, they sacked Dante Moore 6 times, so they had to maybe go away from things that they had planned. But I thought, their game plan, instead of going, vertical, they had that big bust, and they never sort of went back to it. They kind of worked the sidelines, which Indiana, a sure tackling team, does not allow much, screens and things that way. I think Oregon will try to do something a little more different than Indiana has to, because obviously they won the game, but also like I thought Indiana executed what it wanted to do sort of brilliantly, whereas Oregon left some things to be desired. So when you go into this game, I think that's kind of something to note. Was there anything sort of else this week that stood out to you? I mean, we talked to 4 of the players yesterday, sort of on location. Fernando Mendoza, talked about this being the third time he'll face Dante Moore. They played back. He said it was, I think, the last Cal.
Yeah, he referenced that. He referenced that in the Rose Bowl. A Rose Bowl post-game press conference.
The last Pac-12 game after dark.
Playing to the crowd. Down in LA.
And obviously tracing kind of their developments. Dante Moore obviously was sort of like in that mix with the Heisman going into that game against Indiana, and then never really got back into it coming out of it. Whereas Mendoza took off. I asked Mike Shanahan about sort of Mendoza's kind of growth, and he said, what we saw, the mental side of it against Alabama was probably the greatest arc his season take. He takes that pressure early, snaps right back into place, and the offense just sort of takes off. I think earlier in the year it would have taken longer to sort of refocus, where he kind of get back in sync. Didn't have any issues, and sort of got the offense right back on track. So I think you've seen areas where he's grown, even though the arm talent's obviously the same. But he's gotten better as the season's gone.
No, there's no question. Like I was on, I swear I'm not like trying to name drop, but I was on podcast with Nicole Auerbach and Josh Perry, and one of the questions they asked me was, if you're Oregon, like where would you attack Indiana? And I said, I think that the most obvious thing would be to try and make Indiana one-dimensional and make Fernando Mendoza beat you, because he's shown the propensity to make some mistakes when you get a little bit of pressure in his face, when you get him into a place where he doesn't feel like he's got a run game to pivot back to. It all kind of falls on his shoulders. And then I said, the problem with that plan is every team that's done that has lost to him. Like in the end, even when he's had mistakes, in the end, he's still risen to that moment. And when you think about Oregon, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, I know I've had this conversation with other people, one of the sort of prevailing, narratives around this game is that Oregon's got to capitalize on Indiana's mistakes to win. That Indiana does not make a lot of mistakes. They're one of the least turnover-prone teams in America, one of the least penalized teams in America, and so forth. They don't have a lot of, missed tackles and things. Oregon's got to take advantage of the mistakes to win this game. And what's hard for me to process with that is, like the mistakes that people are talking about Oregon needed to capitalize on, they did against a less, maybe a little bit healthier, but less complete Indiana team in October, and Indiana still won. Like I think the best you can do is hope that you can put Fernando Mendoza in those situations. And listen, maybe all you need maybe is 2 quarters, right? Like 2 bad quarters, a bad second quarter, bad third quarter. Oregon's up 10 in the fourth quarter, and Indiana's got all the sort of all the climbing back to do. Mistakes this season. Every time Indiana's made those mistakes this season, every once in a while it just kind of cuts out and comes back. They've risen to the challenge of overcoming it. Who brings up in the comments they had 10 penalties, and the line shift is one of them. I'm sure Kurtz and Penny has brought that up with people since. But like the point is, Indiana committed penalties. Indiana, handed in Oregon 7 points on offense, and Indiana had a coverage bust that allowed Oregon's only offensive touchdown. These are the mistakes we're talking about Oregon having to capitalize on, and Indiana still won that game by 2 scores on the road.
But it's almost like Indiana talks about the mentality to attack and sort of put pressure on teams. Like, you can't be reactive. You can't just hope that they make mistakes. You have to sort of to make either make them make mistakes or just be aggressive and sort of have that define the game. And I think what we haven't seen is a team sort of jumping out early and sort of dictating the pace of the game right out of the gate, right? Where Indiana, likes to obviously get a stop early, get a touchdown, and then they sort of play their game, against Alabama, who you picked, obviously, didn't work out. But, they were able to.
I didn't pick Alabama. Where did you read that?
They were able to, basically from the
branded water.
The second quarter on, sort of dictate the pace of the game, run the clock. We talked about, Fernando Mendoza only threw 16 times a game. I think only dropped back 7 times in that second half. That Oregon can't let Indiana sort of get into that mode where like we can just pick our poison, we can run the ball, we don't have to sort of make any like Fernando Mendoza just got a couple scrambles and that killed Alabama because they're able to just run more clock. Oregon can't get in that position, and sort of I think we'll have to get a double-digit lead early to sort of, shake things up because Indiana really hasn't played like that from behind early.
I think I would flip it over to the other side of the ball. Like, when was the last time a team made Indiana get out of its base defense?
Right.
And I don't mean necessarily in personnel because they'll move things around. We talked about how they'll go to the 4-3 look a lot. On the other hand, Devin Boykin, individually might be playing as good as anyone on this team right now. Like, he's had a couple of really good games. He was outstanding.
Well, Oregon runs a lot of the personnel that the 4-3 was designed for. That Haynes used to like to just that was what he exclusively ran because he runs so much tight end stuff. So,
that was the game where it felt like Indiana's the 3 linebacker sets really started to come into their own. That Oregon game when you felt like Indiana's got 3 on the field and they're almost better for it, which went against convention. But when was the last time somebody forced Indiana into double coverage? When was the last time somebody forced Indiana to do stuff with its safeties that didn't want to do? Like you talk about, for example, not testing, Indiana down the field more in that game after that coverage bust. But if you can't force Indiana to stop playing too high, then you're not going to be able to get down the field because there's always 2 safeties high. There's always 2 safeties over top of everything. But
if you keep taking shots, you put pressure on them because that's what I was saying.
But if you keep taking shots against,
you run the risk of going 3 down.
Well, even more than that, you run the risk of the fact that the team's 2 interception leaders are their starting safeties, and you've got I
think you have to.
Vertical plays take time to develop. If you can't control the line of scrimmage, if you can't run the ball,
was the problem. Bigger problem. But
I think those 2 things happen in concert.
But you can't play scared, is my point, because I think Indiana learned those lessons last year against Notre Dame and Ohio State, where it's like they got rattled, and then they said, "Well, this is not going to work." And you can't just rule out the plays that you think we're going to get you there.
I think the difference is I'm not sure that. I think you could, and you were in the stadium. I wasn't for Oregon. We were obviously both there for Notre Dame and Ohio State. It was discernible, particularly against Notre Dame. Ohio State was a little bit more of, we just can't run this. We can't block it long enough to run it.
Well, when they were jumping the snap count, that might have been acceptable.
But Notre Dame was one where you could tell they weren't. Indiana was trying too hard to manage, trying too hard to play that specific occasion. And not say this is our football and we're going to make them beat us on our terms.
I thought that's what happened in the first
and that's fair. I just think that
maybe the stuff wouldn't work because of what Indiana wasn't doing. But I don't think you can abandon whole cloth when your
quarterback gets your quarterback is sacked 6 times and picked twice. The solution can't be to throw the ball down the field because
but he was sacked 6 times when they went away from it. They were going away from it anyway. So you have to sort of loosen it up somehow. It'll be interesting.
Where we should mention the injury. Jordan Davison hurts. He was Oregon's leading rusher in that game. He was their power back, their short yardage back. you can't get tired in the backfield against this team.
Yeah. Well, you got to try to run. You got to.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But
nobody has. But
right. I mean, like I was thinking about this in preparation for this. Like, like we don't even really have a sample size on what it looks like when a team runs the ball in Indiana, and
right.
forces
has anybody done that really at length this year?
No.
Yeah. So I mean, like, yeah.
Penn State, second half Penn State. That was about the only one.
Brief. I mean, like it was like a brief period of time.
Yeah.
Like a quarter and a half. So I mean, like, and that did put pressure on the defense. Obviously, it made them out of sorts. And that was maybe, I think we talked about that second half was probably the worst team. That second half against Penn State was until the drive, which was the best they played all season. That was the worst the team had played all season long, over more than like 5 minutes span or something like that, or a drive.
But it comes back to not having Davison, because I think a lot of what made that work for Penn State was that Katron Allen was just the bigger, more physical back. He could lean forward. He was gaining yards. He was keeping that team on schedule.
Yeah.
If you get off schedule against this team, like I understand what you're saying about, you have to stick to what you do well and you have to take some shots and some chances. But if you can't stay on schedule, then you can't take those shots because
it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But like, I mean, I say go down swinging, basically. Like, and especially in the playoff, like you can't get passive or sort of say like, well, we'll just play back and see and hope we break. Like you have to, like Kurt Senney talks about this literally all the time. He's like, his defining quote in that 60 minutes interview was like, always attack.
Yeah, it's like what he has like written on his hand or whatever. Yeah.
Him and Brian Haynes have matching tattoos. But and Brian Haynes' philosophy is that you have to, even if you're not, it's not throwing all out blitzes at teams, it's putting pressure on teams and being the aggressor.
Yeah.
And so and I think Indiana in that first matchup and largely this season has been that. If you can't knock them out of that, you're not going to win.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the question is just what can Oregon do in all three phases, but certainly offense and defense. Indiana, I would argue, as well as it has all year. Indiana is, the game is a bit of an outlier. That's probably the best defense Indiana is going to see. This is like 1-11. I know Miami might be more disruptive, but in terms of 1-11 physicality, talent, etc., how well they're coached, how well it's schemed, Indiana is probably more balanced offensively point than it's been all year. When you talk of you mentioned,
well, maybe there we are.
We're back. About that.
If a singular effort, like 400 total yards, 100 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, and just sort of do something that gets us going, and it puts it on his shoulders. It's like we talked about, they don't have necessarily the personnel in the backfield, and it sort of takes sort of like that singular effort by a guy that could just transcend, a really good defense. Like, to me, that's like, you're talking about how Oregon wins that game. Like, that might be their best option or only option.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it is. Can Oregon turn around? And this is simplistic, but like it defined that game. Can Oregon turn around the line of scrimmage? Yeah. Because none of this can happen. Like, none of what we're talking about from Oregon's perspective can happen.
That's like if he runs for 120 yards and scrambles, but he's not
going to be able to do that consistently if there are 2 and 3 Indiana defenders in the backfield most of the time.
Well, sometimes guys can.
Dante Moore is not that kind of player. He is not. I mean, like Trinidad Chambliss might be, Diego Pavia might be. Moore is mobile.
So you're saying they lose to Vanderbilt?
But he is.
Well, you're like those SEC teams, I hear.
But no, seriously, like Moore has dual threat ability, but he is not that kind of. He is not a playmaker that can elude a pass rush that has broken his protection.
Yeah,
consistently. Maybe every once in a while, but he's maybe marginally more effective with his feet than Fernando Mendoza, who's good. But again, it's not like you don't expect Fernando Mendoza to go for 100 yards. If
something weird happens, and you get 3, he breaks 3 runs or something in a row, and then starts putting pressure and those things snowball. Like, that's when you're talking about like what's Oregon's path to victory, I just think like that's something where you can kind of see it because Moore does have sort of talent to be able to do something.
I think what I would agree with, at least on the baseline, is, again, going back to my point that like Oregon actually got a relatively favorable Indiana performance from a mistakes perspective and a cleanliness perspective in Eugene.
Well, yeah, we get a pick six
and still lost. Well, the penalties, the pick six, the busted coverage, and still lost by 2 scores. It's hard for me to imagine Oregon winning this game without something, without us coming away and saying that was a generational sort of like playoff.
Well, that's kind of
defining performance from someone, whether it's a corner, whether it's a quarterback, whether it's Kenyon Sadiq at tight end, who just, someone just proves completely unplayable on the day. I picked Indiana to win the Rose Bowl, so I don't know.
No, but it's funny when you say that. Like,
by the way, we decided the Rose Bowl would be a really good Quidditch stadium, especially in the rain.
It would. What you said about the mistakes, and which is why we had the opposite view of the Rose Bowl, where you said whether it made you less concerned about Indiana, ironically, but like the weather was something that if you could cause a mistake that Indiana hasn't made this, like what happened with the special teams sort of at Ohio State, like those are things like in a dome stadium, you don't necessarily have to worry about weather sort of causing those problems, and because like Indiana just hasn't sort of beat itself in those kind of ways, and I think that one of the coaches talked about special teams, like I think you've seen a lot in the playoffs that those plays in the margins have really made differences, like the special teams mistakes. And Indiana saw that last year. And so like something like that, but if you don't have weather, like we just haven't seen them do that this year. We haven't seen evidence that that'll ever be a possibility unless, like I said, weather would have been an issue and the ball gets slippery or something. So,
and that is why it is, I mean, to my mind, just hard to pick against Indiana. And I know that, I know the line tightened up a little bit this week, and it seemed like the sharp money was moving more, I think, toward Oregon at least covering, but it is just, I mean, it is hard in good conscience to pick Oregon. And it's weird to say that because you also need to acknowledge, like, absolutely they can win. Like this is undeniably one of the 4 or 5 most talented teams in the country, one of the best coach teams. The during the Bobby Dodd presentation, Kurt Signetti, a bunch of like former Bobby Dodd winners went up there. Ralph Friedgen was up there. Paul Johnson was up there. And Signetti was kind of shaking hands with different people. And someone said something about the game. We couldn't hear what he said, but the microphone caught Signetti say, "We just have to beat the best coach team in America." And he wasn't saying that into the microphone, or at least not intentionally. Yeah. That's the way he thinks about this team. And I do think the respect between him and Dan Lanning is genuine. I think they seem to like each other. I think there is a lot of mutual respect between their programs. And like Oregon can absolutely win this game. This is not, I don't think either. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think this is either of us saying Oregon can't win this game.
I think the rematch part of it
is very difficult.
And I think Dan Lanning is a good coach.
It's just a really good, and his coordinators are good coordinators. I mean, yes, they have been dealing with their jobs, but there's a reason why they both got head jobs. There's a reason why they are both going to run their own programs next year. Oregon can win this game. It's just that when you start to break apart all of the different elements of this matchup, it is hard to find a reason, and like an obvious reason, a clear and present advantage that Oregon can use to leverage over Indiana.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's a good time to sort of say what we picked. I mean, I picked.
Well, let me ask you one more thing on that regard. Just one more thing. The only like real hesitation I've had the last few days is it possible that the rematch element of it.
Purdue could not be Oregon. I don't know.
Purdue
is so bad. That is a bad take. Sorry.
But is it possible that the rematch element of it has us thinking too much about the first game when we break down the second one?
No,
do you know what I'm saying? Like the fact that we've seen these teams, like,
that Indiana's just that high.
Does it bias that the analysis too much? Listen, it should bias it some. I'm not saying it shouldn't. Does it bias it too much?
No, because I think what biases me, I mean, like, they beat Ohio State, which I think is a slightly more talented team. I mean, I kind of look at the roster.
I think it's a significantly more talented team. I don't know if it's a significantly better coached team than Oregon.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
But then obviously in the sort of I think the complete Alabama was large. That game was it wasn't some sort of like we squeaked by or we won. I mean, like outside of those first 3 plays, I mean, it was just completely one-sided. So like those things, I think loom just as large in the mind as them winning the first matchup between these two.
I mean, it is just so. I've made this kind of comparison before, but it is just so reminiscent of like early era Nick Saban.
Yeah,
where like you don't feel like you're losing the game as badly as you are. In the moment, yes, that fourth down call. Alabama also blitzed like more than they've blitzed in the game in that game. It was at least all year, but I think the stat was something like, the most they'd blitzed. I wrote it down. It was like more than 52%. I heard this on something breaking it up. More than 52% of Alabama blitzed, 52% of Indiana's dropbacks. Now, obviously, that's not a huge number quantity-wise because Indiana didn't drop back a lot. But that is their highest blitz rate in a game since ESPN started tracking that stat in 2011. And again, that goes back to like what did Kurt Cignetti say before the game? Change the way teams think.
Yeah.
Change the way they think. And, if I'm Dan Lanning, I might almost be more compelled to say we're just going to try and do what we did rather than what is the old paralysis by analysis?
Yeah.
Like if
well, I just don't think you go for fourth down at your own 34-yard line. That's
that's fine. That was
a
wild decision.
But I think the point was that like Kalen DeBoer was so worried about the game getting away from them quickly that he's like, we've got to do something here to get points, and if we don't, we lose. And it was like early in the second quarter, and it was like as disadvantageous of a position they could be in, and they still went for it. Obviously, it cost them. But
and you know what Fernando Mendoza's stats were against the blitz?
Very good.
8 of 8 for 161 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Did not work out.
They changed the way they thought, and they thought wrong.
And you picked Alabama, right?
In this game?
You picked them again, right?
Yes, I like Alabama in the Peach Bowl, and I can't be wrong because they won't lose.
So picks. Mine is I've picked try to stay consistent with the score too. 27-17 Indiana.
It's 28-23 Indiana. And I've got it in my mind that it's another one. I think when I had Indiana losing the Big Ten championship game, it was because of like a 2-point conversion situation. I have it in my mind that Indiana's up like 2 scores, Oregon scores and tries to go for 2 to cut it to a field goal and doesn't.
So you're like picking like the specific pet. Like, so what's Mendoza's numbers in your situation?
Well, it depends on how the blitz rate. Do they drop 8? Somebody asked Brian Haynes yesterday, are you gonna pressure Dante Moore like as much as you did? And he goes, nope, we're doing all drop 8s. And I think it would be funny if they just do all drop 8s now, if they're just in quarters coverage the entire game. I mean, again, like it is one of those where you want to caveat the pick by saying Oregon can absolutely win.
Yeah.
Like I would not be at all shocked if we're done with this. We're in the small hours of Saturday morning doing the post-game podcast, and it's like Oregon 27, Indiana 24, or something like that. But it is difficult in good conscience. And the reason I ask about like the potential bias of that first game is we have an unnatural amount of information to draw from when we start talking about this matchup. So it started getting a lot louder in here.
What's your pick on the other side of the bracket?
I turned this one over a lot, like a ton. And I landed at Ole Miss 34, Miami 31.
Wow.
I know. And I went in. Went in. I wasn't thinking that much about it until I got asked about it earlier today. And I was going to do a radio hit with our friend Mike Glasgow. And so I started thinking about it a little bit before then. And I went to our, he doesn't know us, but our good friend on social media, Parker Fleming's website, CFB Graphs, and I think it had like maybe Miami 28, Ole Miss 22, something along those lines. I am biased toward playmakers at this time of year. I'm biased toward the idea of game changers. You talk about what Dante Moore could do to a game like this.
Yeah.
Trinidad Chambliss, we have seen him do that. And I think if Ole Miss was going to get disrupted by this point, they would have.
But they're losing more coaches as they kind of go on.
That's true.
And so
that's true.
At some point,
but they've been what they've been all year.
But it's kind of a team like Indiana, right? Like where you just get on a run at some point. Like I do think Indiana starting to feel like a team of destiny. Where Ole Miss sort of starting to feel that way. Like everything's against them. They're losing people. Like people are jumping off ship, and they're still like, well, whatever. We're still going. But Miami, man, I mean,
that defense.
just tough to pick
If
against
that
that.
defense really gets to shambles early, then it's Miami. But
in a close game, I mean, what coaching staff? I mean, I don't know what. I mean, we don't have a lot of evidence of what Ole Miss is capable of. But I mean, obviously, Mario.
And you also
have the criticism there.
You've also given Pete Golding like a week and a day.
Yeah.
To prepare a defense, and Pete Golding is a really good defensive coach. To prepare, and he kept his whole defensive staff to prepare a defensive game plan for a Miami offense that is good, but is not necessarily like. I mean, they scored 10 in the first game.
It's probably the worst offense left out of the 14.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They scored 10 in the first 10 in the first game, and was it 24 in the second game? And they were on 17 for a long time, and they kind of got one there at the end when Ohio State was sort of straining. I mean that is probably the one I feel less good about. There's something about a team that has a bunch of like playmakers, a bunch of athletes.
That just feels more like a coin flip to me than this game does.
Well, 34-31 is a
but I'm just saying but it could easily be the other score. And
it could also easily be like 28-17.
Yeah.
And Miami just makes Chambliss' life,
Yeah, and they're playing their best football. I mean, it should be said like they've sort of obviously learned from some of the losses that they suffered, and so you have Indiana versus Ole Miss in the college football finals.
I think everyone had that at the beginning.
That's exactly what everybody had.
That classic. When those two get together, you can throw out the record books because I don't think
was that their opponent in the bowl game?
That's true. Yeah. They played in the Outback Bowl in 2020.
We were there, right?
No, we did not travel that because of COVID.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Covered that from home. Okay. Well, I didn't have COVID. We just didn't.
Just go. Well, anyway, we got a minute or two, right? Any readers, viewers, listeners with questions. We know
we're not going to get into basketball. I mean, we will pivot back to basketball eventually. We promise. But obviously, there are just and I mean, if for no reason other than because like we weren't at Nebraska or we weren't at.
They weren't even playing Nebraska. So
we weren't at Maryland. We won't be at Nebraska. Is what I was about to say.
Isn't Nebraska at home or no? Is it still
it's at home. Okay. Yeah, but it's at noon. We'll be flying back.
Oh
yeah. I mean, if you want to rush to Assembly Hall, but I will not.
So no comments, questions. Zach's in the midst of writing an apology letter
to you for leaving you in Chicago. No, I think the last thing to say is like, at least for me, is. The Rose Bowl, obviously, I think, conveyed its own sense of importance. I think that was the moment we talked about it that night for the fans, for Indiana fans, as much as anyone else, because of what like the Rose Bowl means to Big Ten fans, and in particular, what I think the Rose Bowl had come to symbolize to a fan base like this one that was so desperate for the kind of success and importance in football that the Rose Bowl traditionally conveys upon a Big Ten team, because that's where the Big Ten champion goes. Not anymore. Obviously, this is the last year of the tie-in. Right. This is much more like just like standard big time college football. And Indiana does not look or feel out of place here. Someone asked about the crowd. I think it's going to be comfortably Indiana. Like
I haven't seen as many people, walking around, but I mean, like I think that there's something to be said that people are going to get in tomorrow.
Yes, because it's a Friday game. I know a number of people that are going to work, like fly in tonight or tomorrow, and then work from here tomorrow.
Yeah. So like, but I mean, like. It's going to be an IU lean no matter what, just because the cross-country trip for Oregon fans on short notice is going to be hard.
After the last one, and
it's not drivable. Like this is going to be, is it 80-20 like it was at the Rose Bowl? I don't know about that, but like in terms of like IU will have that advantage, and players have talked about kind of both the Big Ten title game and this one, the Rose Bowl feeling like home field advantages and feeling very good about that, and so I think they'll have a third straight game like that, and that could make a difference in sort of key moments. I think there's no question about that.
Someone says, which is further from Atlanta, Bloomington or Miami? Miami. Florida's a lot bigger than I think people realize. Yeah. It's like 11 or 12 hours from here, I think, to Miami. It's only like 7.5 to Bloomington. I think the other, the other piece of it is it just, not that Oregon fans aren't excited, but I think there is also a novelty still for Indiana fans about, hey, listen, if we can get to a semi, I know a bunch of people too that couldn't go to the Rose Bowl for cost purposes. That said, if they win that game, though, we will just go to the, Georgia's a lot easier to get.
Yeah, because I find it like this in a recent. I did a recent interview about the people have asked a lot about that, but I think it's that now nobody thinks that this is the last one, but this is the first one for generations of fans, right?
Yes,
so and it's not for Oregon. And so, like, I think I think there is a key distinction there. That look, nobody's saying now. I think Signetti's got. With the portal hall that they have, the future looks bright here, and it just doesn't look like sort of a. It's not even one and done because obviously they made the playoffs last year, but they're building for a sustained run of success here. And so I don't think that there's nobody saying like, oh, we'll never get back to this now, which you might have said last year. But I think that this is still for generations, plural of fans. They've never seen anything like this, and they want to live in that moment and see this and see history and be a part of it. And I think you've seen it every step of the way here because it wasn't just the playoffs or the Big Ten title game. It was at Oregon in the regular season. Purdue, they took advantage of wanting to see the end of the regular. They were like
probably 15,000 to 20,000 at Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like every road at Penn State. They had a big showing, so it wasn't just like this was a new phenomenon. Like, oh, we're jumping on the bandwagon. Like literally, they said like, look, this team is so historically good. We got to go see it in person.
And there was some of that last year too. But as you said, I think last year maybe felt a little bit more like the let's not miss this opportunity. This year is more this could be really special. Like this could be something remarkable. And I think that we don't have to go like crazy into all the fan dynamics, but I think the other piece of it for Oregon fans is every one of Oregon's trips is really far.
It's hard. I think you can't bank on that, other than JMU.
And so I think
it's harder.
There's been this element of almost like you might have to pick one or maybe two.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that people are mentioning here how much tickets are going to cost in the national title game. So maybe there's an extent to which like you want to go to this game just for the cost purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we also always say this. There are a lot more IU fans in some of these southern cities than people realize.
You're already building a base. You already have a base there.
Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte, Birmingham, certainly down in Florida, Miami, Tampa, Orlando. Like there are a lot more IU.
So not everybody's driving from Bloomington,
or even like not even driving like it. You might just be getting a puddle jumper from Tallahassee or something, or from Nashville down to Atlanta. And again, because it's on a Friday night, you can do it on Friday and you're back home on Saturday. So
that is Signetti's favorite stat is the biggest alumni base now.
Yes.
Somebody told him that
there's like a company that does like databasing or something around basically like giving, I think, to universities. And Indiana's always been among the biggest. Michigan State's up there, Penn State's up there, Ohio State's up there.
Now it's the biggest.
Well, according to someone. I mean, they get to claim it. Any other business?
I don't know. How are you doing? You enjoying your trip?
Yeah, it's nice. I'm gonna go see my family after we're done here. See my niece.
There you go.
So
it's exciting.
Yeah.
People mentioned Publix. You haven't gotten Publix.
I haven't gotten Publix. Maybe tomorrow. Lunch tomorrow.
It's not a lot ton of meal time.
No, there's not. I was thinking about taking him to Pond City Market for lunch tomorrow. So
how far is that?
It's like a mile. It's like an Uber. It's an Uber ride.
Okay.
It'd be easy.
Yeah.
It's over by Georgia Tech.
That's doable.
All right. Atlanta Breakfast Club for lunch.
And then Vortex after the game.
Pond City Market after the game. That's madness. I fly out Saturday morning.
They were telling they were going to have a media party all night long.
Yeah, they did.
Straight from the media party to the airport.
They did say that it was going to be open all night. So, party.
No, I was not invited to the Osterman family house, unfortunately.
Well, I'm not going to the Osterman family house.
I am going now, since you guys aren't going to be there. Just a party.
Do you know where it is?
No.
Okay. Good luck. Don't worry. It's not a big town. It'll be easy to find.
I'll just go knocking on doors.
He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you all. What's the schedule tomorrow? There isn't a ton. If you're here, I believe there is a pep rally adjacent sort of thing in there is a fan fest over at the Georgia World Congress Center near the stadium. I think I was going to go meet a friend over there and try to find like souvenirs for my kids tomorrow at some point. And I think there's a pep rally like immediately preceding the game. Beyond that, basically all the hay's in the barn. I think the teams have already had their final walkthroughs at the stadium. All the press stuff is done. So it is pretty much just the game.
Yeah.
From here on out. Although tonight, if you're watching this, you should leave wherever you are and go to the aquarium because from 3 to 7, I believe you can get in for free.
Oh.
There's like a pregame sort of event there, and the Georgia Aquarium is quite expensive. I might be wrong about the free thing, but I know there's a pregame event there.
Go and be like, Zach Osterman said this is free. I'm here for the party.
And at 6 o'clock, I think there's again like another sort of cheerleader-led pep rally type thing with both schools because I know our photographer's going to be there.
Yeah, you've been trying to sell the aquarium to me like all day. So
go see the whale shark.
I've been, so I don't need to.
There used to be 2 whale sharks. Sadly, now there's only 1, I believe.
Don't end on a depressing note.
It's sad.
And did the whale shark pick Alabama too at some point?
Did you see the Malayan sun bear picked Indiana?
No.
At the zoo?
What does that mean?
I tweeted it out, and I said they have a sun bear, and they put, I don't know, like treats in 2 boxes, and he went for the Indiana box. He got all the way in the end. Tweeted it out and said, "This is the only Peach Bowl prediction my children will put any stock into."
There you go.
They love to Atlanta.
I heard the kids are giving you a hard time about your pick last week.
It's true. It's true. Even in the neighborhood, I get no respect.
No. Oh no!
Oh no! All right, he's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you all for joining us, as always. Yes. Thank you all for listening. Everyone who listened through wherever you get your podcast, wherever you sort of platform your podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. And please check out heraldtimesonline.com and indystar.com/sports for everything. We got a ton of stuff, obviously, building up to this game, profiles on people, stories on people, columns about stuff.
Mostly about Indiana. And then you wrote a little bit about Alabama this week, but mostly Indiana.
Yeah. Did I? I wrote about D'Angelo Pons.
Didn't you just do an SEC column?
Saying the year of SEC dominance is over.
It's over.
I did like D'Angelo Pons saying he didn't hear the noise about Alabama.
So what did he? I didn't read that story. What happened with D'Angelo?
He basically said that he admitted someone sent him, I think probably like a tweet or something that was sort of like this, because it ran around Alabama Twitter that like Pons is too small, and and someone said, and it went like viral after the game, he doesn't like to hit. Which was an
somebody from Alabama's team, or just
no, just
okay,
so
it wasn't motivation from Alabama,
right?
Trash talking.
Yes, but that was an unfortunate allegation to make when in game he broke someone.
He doesn't like to hit; only likes to break balls.
Yes, he doesn't like to hit until he does.
Okay, so I thought it was trash talking from Alabama.
If there was, didn't acknowledge that, but he did acknowledge that like someone sent him. At least he claimed someone sent him kind of the. Enough of it, and he sort of said like I don't listen to it, but then he also said, but I'm also motivated by it.
Well, he's mentioned it twice because he mentioned it in the press conferences the other day too. He's like said something about Alabama, making him mad. So
yeah,
he's like I don't think about it, but I think about it every day.
Exactly. That was very much the tenor of it. I don't hear it,
but I listen.
But I heard it.
I have notifications,
and I made them pay for it, for that which I did not hear. So
he hit Ty Simpson so hard. He left college.
We're going to leave it there before we get in trouble. Thank you all for joining us. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners, previewing the Peach Bowl. We will talk to you soon.